The alarm siren rips through the night, a piercing shriek swallowed by the roar of a typhoon trying to devour the island whole. At Joint Base Trident's reach, rain lashes down like steel pellets, and the wind screams through the architecture like a banshee. Inside a cavernous warehouse, lit only by the frantic strobing of emergency lights outside, Master Sergeant Elias Thorne stands motionless. The air is thick with the smell of machine oil and the ozone sting of the storm. Before him, a shadow takes form. Clad head to toe in black tactical gear, armed to the teeth, the intruder moves with the predatory silence of a wolf. He hadn't counted on an old man in worn quartermaster fatigues. A flicker of hesitation. It's all Elias needs. His first move isn't fast. It's brutally efficient. A pivot, deflecting a knife hand strike, his body weight flowing into a wrist lock that ends with a dry, sickening crack of bone. The second move is a precise elbow strike to the temple. The intruder stumbles. The final move is a flawless leg sweep, sending the giant crashing to the concrete floor with a heavy, final thud. It is over in less than 3 seconds. As the intruder lies gasping, his eyes fix not on Elias's weathered face, but on his right hand, where a worn, battered brass coin is clenched tight. His breath hitches, raw terror eclipsing the pain in his eyes. He whispers a single phrase before consciousness deserts him. The coin. So it was you. That coin wasn't just metal. It was a promise forged in fire and betrayal. To understand why a master assassin would freeze at the sight of it, we have to go back to the beginning. Welcome back to This Really Happened. If you believe the greatest heroes are often hidden where you'd least expect, hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. Today's story begins in a place the world forgot. Master Sergeant Elias Thorne, 58 years old, was part of the landscape at Joint Base Trident's reach. Like the salt-stained moss on the concrete walls or the ceaseless rhythm of the surf, he was simply there. A quartermaster on the verge of retirement, known to the younger troops by a name that was equal parts affection and dismissal. Pops. His days were a metronome of sameness, checking manifests, signing requisitions, ensuring every piece of gear was in its designated place. He moved slowly, methodically, his back stooped slightly from decades of service, or from something else, something far heavier. Trident's reach wasn't a posting for glory seekers. It was a forgotten, strategic outpost in the Sea of Japan, a damp, dreary purgatory where careers went to die. For Elias, it was the final stop, 3 more months, and he would be home, closing a long chapter of his life. His goal was simple: finish his time in peace, unnoticed. But peace is a luxury in a place filled with ambitious young men. Lieutenant Cole Martinez, call sign Cowboy, was a rising star in the base's Marine Reconnaissance Unit. He was sharp, confident, and carried a thinly veiled contempt for what he called the old guard. To Martinez, Elias was a living relic. That contempt wasn't just youthful arrogance. It was rooted in a deeper scar. Martinez's mentor, an officer he'd revered like a father, had been killed on a mission in Kandahar years ago. The official reason: a judgment error by a veteran old-timer who couldn't keep pace with the modern battlefield. Since then, Martinez didn't trust experience. He trusted speed, technology, and the ruthless calculus of youth. One afternoon, as Elias was overseeing a munitions inventory, Martinez and his team swaggered past. "Watch your step, Pops," Martinez said, his voice laced with condescension. "That lucky coin of yours won't catch you if you fall." He glanced at the old coin Elias was known to fiddle with in his pocket. Elias didn't respond. He just gave a slow, silent nod and returned to his checklist, his calloused fingers tracing the lines of text. Martinez smirked and walked on, his squad chuckling behind him. After they were gone, Elias pulled the coin from his pocket. It was worn so smooth its original markings were nearly gone. In the dim, yellow light of the warehouse, it didn't shine. It absorbed the light, a small, dense black hole of memories he could never escape. They saw an old man. They didn't see the ghosts in his eyes, or the weight of the metal in his palm. They didn't know the coin wasn't for luck. It was collateral on a debt that had yet to be paid. The first real crack in Elias's quiet existence came not with a bang, but with a crackle of radio static. It was during a major training exercise, a simulated amphibious assault on the island's rocky northern coast. Martinez's recon team was the tip of the spear. From his observation post in the supply depot, overlooking the bay, Elias watched their progress on a dusty monitor. He wasn't supposed to be watching, but old habits died hard. The air in the depot felt heavy, charged with static, the way it always did before a big one rolled in off the sea. Another storm was coming. He noticed something the mission planners had missed, something only decades of watching this specific coastline could teach you. The tide was turning faster than the charts predicted. Martinez's planned route would lead his team into a treacherous bottleneck of submerged rocks in less than 20 minutes. Elias hesitated. It wasn't his place. Intervening would mean drawing attention. But he could see the face of Martinez's mentor in his mind, another good man lost to a preventable mistake. He turned to a forgotten piece of equipment in the corner, an old analog shortwave radio, a relic from another era. He keyed the mic, his voice a low, anonymous rasp, using a back-channel frequency he knew no one monitored anymore. Spearhead, this is Watcher. Your north by northeast approach is a no-go. Repeat, a no-go. Tidal surge is 5 mics ahead of schedule. Adjust east, hold for 10. Over. On the beach, Martinez heard the transmission. He was furious. Who the hell was Watcher? Some REMF playing armchair quarterback? Ignore it, he snapped to his team. But his own commanding officer listening in from the command tent overruled him. The correction was made. Later, the post-mission analysis would show that the anonymous warning had almost certainly prevented multiple casualties and equipment loss. Martinez was credited with a successful mission, but the praise felt like ash in his mouth. He was obsessed. He wanted to know who had undermined his authority. The mystery was soon eclipsed by a far bigger event. A week later, a sleek, unmarked helicopter descended onto the base's main helipad. It wasn't military. It was the kind of aircraft that moved in the shadows of global power. From it emerged a man in a tailored suit, flanked by security personnel who moved with the unnerving stillness of apex predators. The base commander scrambled to meet him, his face a mask of nervous deference. The visitor was David Sterling, the deputy director of the CIA. His presence on a forgotten outpost like Trident's Reach was like an eagle landing in a chicken coop. It made no sense, and it put everyone on edge. Sterling was on a walk and talk with the base commander, discussing some high-level strategic concern in the region. His visit was supposed to be a secret, a brief stopover. But as they passed the sprawling supply depots, Sterling suddenly stopped mid-sentence. He squinted, his eyes fixed on a figure in the distance. It was Elias, methodically loading crates onto a pallet, his movements slow and deliberate. A flicker of disbelief crossed Sterling's face, followed by something else. Recognition. "Excuse me, Commander," Sterling said, his voice suddenly tight. He broke away from the stunned commander and began walking directly toward the warehouse, his security detail scrambling to keep up. From across the yard, Martinez and his team saw the whole thing. They saw the most powerful man on the base, a spook from Langley, make a beeline for Pops. Their jeers and jokes died in their throats, replaced by a profound, unsettling confusion. Martinez, seeing his chance to understand, started to walk over. He didn't get 10 feet before one of Sterling's security men stepped into his path, a hand gently but firmly placed on his chest. "That's close enough, Lieutenant." The dismissal was quiet, absolute, and humiliating. Martinez froze, watching from a distance as Sterling spoke to the old man, not as a superior, but as an equal. The fire in Martinez's gut turned from suspicion to rage. He watched Sterling place a hand on Elias's shoulder, a gesture of immense, shared history, then turned and walked away without another word, leaving Elias standing alone amidst the crates. The encounter took less than 2 minutes, but it shattered the quiet world Elias had so carefully constructed. The whispers started immediately. Who was Pops? What was his connection to the CIA? Martinez watched it all, his suspicion now burning like a fever. This wasn't just an old man anymore. This was a lie. And fueled by his own past demons, Martinez decided he was going to be the one to expose it. The arrogance of youth was about to collide with a history it could not possibly comprehend. The confrontation happened 2 days later. Martinez, unable to let it go, had used his officer's credentials to pull Elias Thorne's service record. What he found only deepened the mystery. The file was a ghost. 25 years of service boiled down to a single page with basic training records, a few routine postings, and then nothing. A vast, classified desert spanning 2 decades. For Martinez, this was the final proof. It was a cover story. He didn't follow the chain of command. He went straight for the jugular. He found Elias in the main depot, and in front of half a dozen other soldiers, effectively ordered the master sergeant to follow him. Elias, seeing the storm in the young lieutenant's eyes, knew this was inevitable. He complied without a word. Martinez marched him straight into the office of the base commander, a man named Commander Davies, who was in the middle of a secure video conference. "Lieutenant, what is the meaning of this?" Davies demanded, his face flushing with anger at the interruption. "Sir, I apologize for the intrusion," Martinez said, his voice tight with self-righteous conviction. "But I believe this man, Master Sergeant Thorne, is a security risk. His service record is a fabrication. I believe he's a fraud, and given recent events, possibly an embedded operative for a foreign power." Commander Davies stared, dumbfounded, first at Martinez, then at Elias, who stood there with the quiet patience of a mountain. Before Davies could formulate a response, the door to his office opened again. It was David Sterling. The CIA deputy director's eyes took in the scene in an instant. The furious lieutenant, the baffled commander, and Elias, standing there, looking tired. "Commander," Sterling said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "I need your office. Please secure the corridor outside. You and the lieutenant will remain. Sergeant Thorne, you stay right where you are." The air in the room became ice. Davies quickly ended his call and did as he was told. The door clicked shut, sealing the 4 men inside. Sterling placed his encrypted briefcase on the commander's desk. He didn't look at Martinez. He looked at Elias. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, Elias." He then turned his gaze to Martinez, and for the first time, the young lieutenant felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. This wasn't the polite politician he'd seen earlier. This was something else entirely. "Lieutenant," Sterling began, his voice dangerously soft, "you have, in your commendable but misguided zeal, kicked a hornet's nest you can't even see. You are demanding answers about a man whose real file is stored in a sub-level vault beneath Langley, protected by security measures that make this entire base look like a public library." He opened the briefcase. Inside was a single thin file, bound in crimson with the words, "Eyes Only Sunbird" stamped across it. He slid it across the desk. 20 years ago, Sterling said, his voice now a low, somber narrative. The agency ran a deniable operation in the Hindu Kush mountain range in Central Asia. Codename Sunbird. The mission was to extract a high-value asset, a nuclear physicist, before he could fall into the wrong hands. It was a two-man job. Infill, grab, exfil. Simple on paper. He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the room. The mission went sideways. They were ambushed, their exfil compromised. We now know they were betrayed by their own local contacts. They were cut off, surrounded, in the middle of a blizzard at 10,000 feet. The last transmission we ever got was 2 words through a storm of static. Sterling leaned forward, his eyes boring into Martinez. Snowstorm. Betrayed. After that, silence. For 20 years, the official record has stated that Sunbird 1 and Sunbird 2 were both lost, presumed killed in action, their bodies buried under the ice. He tapped the file. "You're not accusing a quartermaster, Lieutenant. You're accusing a ghost. This man is Master Sergeant Elias Thorne. But for a world that doesn't exist anymore, he was known as Sunbird 1. One of the most effective paramilitary operatives this agency has ever produced." Commander Davies stared at Elias, his mouth slightly agape. Martinez's face had gone pale, the color draining from it as if a plug had been pulled. The old man he called Pops was a legend from a ghost story. Through it all, Elias remained still, but Sterling saw it. A slight tremor in his hand, the one that wasn't holding the coin. For a fraction of a second, his eyes closed, the only outward sign of the 20-year-old wound being torn open anew. "The coin you find so amusing, Lieutenant," Sterling continued, his voice dripping with ice, "was a pact between Sunbird 1 and Sunbird 2, a personal token. Their promise to each other was that if one of them ever turned, if they were ever captured and compromised, the other would be the one to settle the debt, to put a brother out of his misery." A profound, crushing silence descended on the room. Martinez felt the floor drop out from under him. He had mocked a man's solemn vow to his fallen comrade, and at that exact moment, as if summoned by the ghosts of the past, the first typhoon warning siren began to wail across the base, a low, mournful sound that signaled the coming of a storm far greater than the one inside that office. The transition from a bureaucratic showdown to a primal fight for survival was terrifyingly swift. The typhoon hit Trident's reach not like a storm, but like an artillery barrage. Within an hour, the base was plunged into chaos. Power grids failed, backup generators sputtered and died, and all external communications, satellite, radio, internet, were severed, cutting the island off from the world. They were alone. In the command office, the 4 men were trapped by the raging storm outside and the suffocating truth within. But as the lights flickered and died, plunging them into emergency lighting, Elias Thorne changed. The stooped, tired quartermaster vanished. In his place stood Sunbird 1. His posture straightened. His eyes, no longer distant, became sharp, analytical, sweeping the room, assessing threats. "The perimeter sensors will be down," Elias said, his voice no longer hoarse but clear and commanding. "The wind will be providing acoustic cover. If anyone wanted to breach this base, now would be the time." Sterling and Commander Davies looked at him, their faces illuminated in the red glow of the emergency lights. They were seeing the legend in real time. Martinez stood frozen, a statue of regret and awe. "Davies, lock down this building," Elias commanded, his authority flowing so naturally that the commander simply nodded and moved to obey. "Sterling, you're the asset. Stay here. Lieutenant?" He turned to Martinez. The young Marine flinched. "You're with me." This is where our story began. In the howling darkness of the storm, Elias moved not like an old man, but like a wraith. He knew the base's weaknesses, its blind spots, its forgotten tunnels. He was hunting. He led Martinez through the screaming wind to the main supply depot, the very place Martinez had mocked him just days before. "Why here?" Martinez shouted over the gale. "It's the most valuable target," Elias replied, his voice calm. "Weapons, comms gear, explosives, it's the prize." Inside, the cavernous space was a tomb of shadows. They split up, moving down parallel aisles of steel shelving. And then Elias saw him. The figure in black, moving silently toward the munitions locker. The fight was short, brutal, and ended with the intruder on the floor. But as Elias stood over the downed man, a devastating sense of déjà vu washed over him. He had seen this man fight before. He knew those movements. As he leaned down, he noticed the intruder wasn't just unconscious. He was dying. A shard of metal from a falling shelf had pierced his side during the fall. It was in that moment, as he knelt, that Elias recognized the move the intruder had attempted. A unique, desperate knife lunge. A feint to the body followed by a slash to the throat. It was a savage signature move. A move Elias himself had created 20 years ago, during a winter of survival in the mountains. A move he had taught to only one other person on Earth. His blood ran cold. With trembling hands, he reached down and pulled the tactical hood from the intruder's head. The face underneath was older, scarred, and gaunt, but unmistakable. It was the face of a ghost, the face of his partner, the face of Sunbird 2. And clenched in the dying man's hand, Elias saw it. The second coin, identical to his own. The truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. His partner hadn't died on that mountain. He had been captured. He had turned. And now, 20 years later, he had been sent back as an assassin to silence the only other person in the world who knew the truth of Operation Sunbird. He had been sent to kill Elias. Just then, Martinez rounded the corner, his rifle raised. He saw the scene. Elias kneeling, the unmasked intruder, and the two identical coins, one in each man's hand, catching the faint emergency light. The full, gut-wrenching weight of the story Sterling had told slammed into him. This wasn't just a fallen enemy. This was Elias's brother. "Is that him?" Martinez asked, his voice a choked whisper. Elias didn't look up. He looked down at the face of the man who had been his brother, then his ghost, and now, finally, his enemy. He gently closed the man's eyes. "The promise is kept," Elias said, his voice hollow with an ancient grief. "The debt is paid." He stood up, leaving his partner's coin where it lay. As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the receding storm clouds, Elias Thorne, Sunbird 1, walked out of the warehouse. leaving 20 years of ghosts behind him in the darkness. In the aftermath, a quiet, efficient cleanup operation descended upon Trident's reach. The official story, crafted by David Sterling himself, was simple and clean. During the typhoon, a lone wolf terrorist attempted to infiltrate the base and was neutralized by base security. The name of the deceased was classified. The incident was buried under a mountain of paperwork. Elias Thorne was quietly offered everything: a full, honorable reinstatement of his true rank and record. The Intelligence Star, the agency's highest award for valor. A quiet, comfortable desk job at Langley for the rest of his days. He refused it all. He didn't want honors. He didn't want recognition. He wanted the one thing he had been promised for 20 years: peace. His only request was for the retirement papers he was already scheduled to receive. Sterling, understanding a debt that went beyond any medal, granted it without question. On Elias's final day on the base, the sun shone brightly, washing the island clean. He was in civilian clothes for the first time in decades, a simple collared shirt and slacks, looking like any other tourist. As he walked toward the ferry that would take him back to the mainland and back to a life he barely remembered, a figure blocked his path. It was Lieutenant Martinez. The young Marine stood tall, his uniform immaculate. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by a profound, humbling respect. He didn't say a word. There were no words that could possibly suffice. Instead, he simply raised his hand to his brow and rendered the sharpest, most heartfelt salute of his entire career. A salute not to a master sergeant, but to a legend. A salute of apology, of gratitude, and of understanding. Elias stopped. He looked at the young man standing before him, a man who represented a future he would never be a part of. He saw the regret in his eyes, but also the newfound strength. He saw a good officer who had learned a hard lesson. Instead of just nodding or returning the salute, Elias did something unexpected. He stepped forward. He reached out a gentle hand and straightened the collar on Martinez's uniform, a small, almost paternal gesture. It was a silent act of mentorship, of forgiveness. It was a passing of the torch. In that one quiet moment, the debt between them was also paid. Elias then turned and continued on his way, not looking back. He reached the perimeter fence near the docks. He stopped for a final moment, looking out at the vast blue expanse of the sea. He reached into his pocket and took out the old, battered coin. For 20 years, it had been a burden, a reminder of a failure and a terrible promise. Now its purpose was fulfilled. It was just a piece of metal. He didn't throw it into the sea. That would have been too dramatic. Instead, he simply placed it on top of a wooden fence post, leaving it to glint in the afternoon sun. He left it there, along with the ghost of Sunbird 1, and walked away. True honor, it seems, is rarely found in the thunder of applause or the gleam of medals on a chest. Sometimes it's found in the quiet burdens we carry in silence, in the promises we keep when no one is watching. Elias Thorne didn't need the world to know his story. He just needed it to be over. He had paid a debt no one knew he owed, and in doing so, he had finally earned his peace. What do you think is harder? To face the enemy in front of you, or to face the ghosts of your own past? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of silent honor touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to come back to This Really Happened, as we continue to uncover the legends hidden in plain sight